Hello and welcome to Pochard Lake, all the way up here in the Cotswolds. Owned by a good friend of mine, Steve Pochard. I used to be a sergeant major in the 1st Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, and isn't it amazing the wonderful things that have come out of my career within the Army. It's where I'm going to spend my winter. I did some time just before the lockdown in January, February and March, earlier on in the year. We're into December now and winter has really started. Last week was the first session I did for what for me is the winter, the 1st of December, and I caught a couple of fish. So things have started off really well, but there's an awful lot to think about when it comes to winter fishing, and it's the time of year where I find it the biggest challenge of all. It's an amazing place, 12 acres in size, probably 150 fish, which 50 of those are the originals, and those are the carp that I'm here specifically to catch. We'll go through all the little minor details a bit later on, but for the moment I just want to take in the atmosphere and enjoy the challenge that winter sets me. With a quick brew to warm my fingers, I proceeded to get the rods ready to rock and roll. My usual stiff link pop-up rig was my chosen arrangement due to the lake being very weedy. The rigs consist of a pre-tied chod section attached simply to an illusion boom and balanced with the utmost care. The area of the lake that I decided to target was slap bang in the middle of this beautiful 12-acre lake, and for very good reason. It firstly enables a good view of the majority of the lake. Secondly, and probably more importantly, this part of the lake has very good winter form. There are dense weed beds still present at this time of year that warm the carp as well as the last of their natural food. I also know there are some lovely clear spots between those weed beds, and they are perfect for presenting a rig. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do before I put the updates out is give them a little dip for only 5 minutes. I may do it just before I cast that as well. And in the main, I'm doing it to get rid of any nasty nifs I may have put on the hook baits. And when I say getting rid of the nasty nifs, I mean, you know, if you filled up with petrol on the way to the lake, reading the newspaper, anything like that can get some horrible stuff on your hands, a bit of ink, a bit of petrol, a bit of diesel. To me, it's something that will that could detract from the usefulness of your hook bait. And the reason I leave it for 5 minutes is just one, so it gets rid of any smells, but a little bit of will go down the hole that I've used the baiting needle for. A little bit gets trapped in the swivel, maybe into the tungsten putty, and just gets a little bit of smell in the water or something, especially when I'm using sort of small amounts of bait or even single hook baits, may add just that much to the attraction. But that's what I do for fishing over bait, which is what I'm going to do today, and I just don't want to make them any more different than the freebies I'm going to put out, which I expect them to eat anyway. Oh yeah. That went exactly where we wanted it to be, right in the dip. Oh, that is more, that's so on the money. In amongst all that weed, to feel that drop, it's just, mate, it's like catching a carp itself, isn't it, when you get it right. That's 2 rods that are fishing better than they've ever fished in their lives. Now, mate, might just see I'm holding the line in my fingers for the sake of it, but I'm not. I'm getting the bow completely out of the line, so there is, as direct as I can make it, contact with my lead. It's such a weedy lake, you don't want your line looping around, little bits of weed everywhere. You want it as straight as you possibly can. I'm going to slacken them off slightly, but the first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm in direct contact with that lead, and yeah, that's what we are. Now we need to set it up on the bank sticks. Right, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't put my bobbins on straight away, and I don't switch the alarms on to annoy other people either. But I let a little bit of line off now and again until that line stops going up in the water and stretching out towards the spot. Yeah, as I said, but I've said it so many times, I just believe the only thing carp are really frightened of is bumping into lines a lot of the times. There is the odd occasion they don't give a damn, but I think it's a big signal that there's danger in that particular area where there's food that they want to eat. And the less cautious they are when they approach your bait, the more likely you are to catch one. And so until that stops tightening up in the water, I won't put my bobbins on, but when I do, I have them down at half mast, so there's plenty of indication. So many people get fed up with like what they call wind bites. I take absolutely no notice of that. There's a definite difference between the lines pulling up tight when the wind gets them and when a fish has swam through, and over the years you get to know that, but it is worth getting indication. That's what indicators are all about. It's not all about indicating a bite, it's indicating what's going on in your swim and around your baited area, and that is the information that catches you a carp. With all 3 rods out, it was time to introduce some bait. My baiting tactics rarely change throughout the winter and have served me well throughout the years. The bait would be a mix of 10 and 15 mil hybrid boilies, in addition to a few handfuls of the corresponding response pellets that break down so quickly and leave a lasting scent in the area. I was using a spawn to put the bait out, and as luck would have it, all 3 spots were at 13.5 wraps, which meant I could bait up without the hassle of re-wrapping the rods 3 times. I deposited 4 spawns of bait on each rod to begin with the intention of a top-up should I receive a bite. The afternoon passed quickly, and with the short winter days, it wasn't long before the sun was low in the afternoon sky, marking the fact that darkness was near. It was time for another brew to warm my hands again, and with the trap set, I was as hopeful as ever. I've probably got an hour and a half of daylight left, and I've set up in this particular swim number 6 on the lake for several reasons. The carp tend to congregate around the thicker areas of weed, and I know from the last couple of trips I've done here that there's a massive bed of weed out there, probably at sort of 14.5, 15 wraps out. And what I'm trying to do is get as close to that weed as I possibly can. One, that water temperature around weed at this time of year is just that little bit higher than the rest of the lake. And 2, their natural food, or what's left of it in the winter, will be in that weed. So they're going to stay near to it most of the time to get the advantages of that. And what I have done, I've been very, very lucky. All 3 of these rods, and they're in different areas, are exactly the same distance. So I've clipped up a 4th rod, baited it with exactly the same pop-up, put it in a little bit of dip, and it's all ready to rock and roll. Should I get a bite, I can get a rod back on there as quickly as possible. Now, before it gets dark, I think the best thing to do is for me to grab another brew, prepare for the night ahead and the wind and the rain that's forecast, and we'll see what the carp think. With evening drawing in, anticipation was very high. More tea was consumed, of course, to keep warm more than anything, and with everything in place, I could only hope the carp would fancy a midnight buffet. With darkness descending upon us, bite time was also here. I just got into the bag to warm up when the alarm signalled to take. With fish up to 38 pound, it was so exciting. My 3 previous trips to this lake, the bites have come shortly after darkness has fallen, and yeah, I just switched my microphone off and all the lights, and thankfully one of the lights on my alarms lit up, and it just amazes me how cool some people can be when they get a bite. And With Christmas round the corner, it just reminds me what a 12-year-old kid must feel like at Christmas. The fish is just out here, it hasn't buried itself in the weed. I think stopping that fish from getting any impetus into the weed is a great help. It's not very often I've still got the lead attached. Wow, listen to that. Whoa. I'm not one of these people that allows carp to take line freely, and wow, this is a powerful fish. It's finding it quite easy to get that line off of that reel. Thing is, this place is such a healthy environment. Oh dear, what is wrapped around this? That is just one strong fish. Goodness gracious. Oh. Light on fire! Wow! Oh, dearie me. Oh, I think. My goodness. Look at that. I'm so sorry. And I'm not talking and being very verbal as I normally am, but I'm just going to take another look in here. Oh my dear goodness. Oh my lord. Well, I hope you can all make sense of what I'm saying due to my excitement. This is very much a second night water when things come together, and get a bite on the first night I think is very inducing for the weather that's about to come. I think the carp are more aware of it than we ever will be with the air pressures and things like that. As I said earlier, I've got a rod wrapped up, baited up, dipped, ready to rock and roll as soon as I got a bite. With that fish in the net, I'm now going to put this back out on the spot. We need to take as much advantage of the shorter bite times in winter. So yeah. Let's rock and roll. Oh, yes. Oh dear. I couldn't have done that better. I was slacking off a bit of line, but now at night, because I don't want to shine a torch out in the middle of the lake, just in case. I'll wait for that bobbin to rise a little bit and then slacken it off a couple of times before I put it into the line clip, and we're rocking and rolling. But put the alarm on, I'm now fishing again, which took seconds, where if I was re-rolling a rod or had to bait that rod, I've saved all that time. You know, I've just caught a fish and I'm fishing again. And to be honest with you, time when you're carp fishing is your biggest enemy, and that is a good way of making good use of it. Anyway, best thing we got to do is have a look at a carp. Light my fire. Okay, now obviously the first and most important thing, this is one angry fish, and I don't want his fins to get bent up. So that's them tucked away nicely, and there's nothing more to do. Oh, blimey. Either that or I'm getting old, but this feels a little heavier than I thought. Okay, just about to weigh him. We've zeroed everything in. I'd like Brad to do the honours and tell me what he spins the wheel of the fortune round to. In all honesty, as I normally don't, I don't really care. I just hope my fires will stay lit for a very long time.
22.7.
That'll do very nicely indeed. Wow, what a beautiful fish. If ever you thought winter carp fishing wasn't worth it, just look at this fish, look at the colours of it, look at the condition. It's absolutely fantastic, and I simply couldn't ask for anything else. As a matter, you know, of course we weighed him, he's a little over 22 pounds, but to me it's the challenge that it's created, catching it in the heart of England at the Cotswolds, just incredible. What a beautiful fish, and I'll never ever be able to say thank you enough, young man. Stunning, absolutely stunning. There you go, out that way, young man. And I think you are an angler, young man. Don't swim round in circles. Go on, go and find your buddies, but don't tell them what happened. Well, a bit like a drowned rat, but with the fires burning the way they are inside me, yeah, it's a warm winter's night for me, and doesn't get any better than that. Yes! With the fish returned, it was obviously time for a celebratory brew and a few biscuits, and I also messaged Lindy the news that I'd call. Little did I know I wouldn't be waiting long for the alarm to sound again. No idea what the time is. Oh dear. But, dragged from my slumber by a bite. I said it's not. Oh, everybody's finding something, isn't they? I've no idea. The carping closest and right on the surface, and I think it's gone. Oh dear. Is it? Oh blimey, sorry. Blind as a bat. And Brad, who has far better eyesight than I, has told me it's in the net, and looks like another good fish, but I think the best thing for me to do for the fish itself, more than anything, is to try and get rid of some of that weed. I think it's a little bit of my amateur dramatics. Oh man, that is so exciting. I'm sorry, I don't seem to be that excited about it, but I'm just worried about it wrapped up in that weed. I'd rather it was in the bottom of my net for his own safety. And then I can tell you just how lit my fires are. Oh my goodness. Alright, I know, mate. Just trying to relieve you of your. Wow. Alright. Oh my goodness. Oh. Look at that.
28.12.
Yep. Which equals my personal best for this water. And wow. For me, this is one of the stars of the show. A fish, one of the originals of the lake, called Heli. That's what her scales spell on the side. 28 pound and 12 ounces, and I have to be honest, when I came here, I never expected, well, I didn't expect to catch a 28, but I didn't expect to catch such a special fish. And again, she may not be the biggest carp in the world, but she means a lot to a lot of people, and yeah, bless her heart. It's one of the originals as well. How fantastic. The morning brought with it wind and rain I'd been expecting. Set up in the teeth of it made it quite uncomfortable, but I'd rather be uncomfortable when fishing in the right area than not. And whilst the weather didn't feel that good, a mild weather front in the winter is perfect carp conditions, and it certainly showed. Okay, in military parlance, I'm going to give you a sit rep. This is the first morning of my session, and yeah, I had a little bit more than I expected last night. That wonderful 22.7 common. It was a stunning fish and lit all my fires. But to catch that fish called Heli at 28.12 at 2 o'clock in the morning, yeah, I thought I was going to set the whole of the Cotswolds on fire with yeah, the fire that was coming out of my head. But it was fantastic. I recast that rod, obviously, and about an hour ago, I got a bite on the middle rod, and it got locked up solid in the weed, and by the time I got it moving, it was with a massive clump of weed. I had that in the net within about 30 seconds. As I say, it's waiting in a retainer to have his photograph taken. We didn't get any footage of it because it was over and done with so quickly. And unfortunately, that recast rod, which is about 5 yards to the left of where I got that bite, I got a bite on that as well, which is just so unusual at this time of year. But whilst you're reeling in one fish, or what I thought was a fish, with all that weed around it, it's hard to control that other rod, and that must have got buried so deep in the rod by the time I retrieved the rig. It was just with a ball of weed and no fish. There are going to be casualties in weed, and one of the things that you have to do in carp fishing is adjust to the situations that you're faced with. Don't just go on regardless, because if you're having faults, if things are going wrong, you need to change them. And I'm thinking, now that the fish are feeding well on that spot, to get 4 bites in a night is quite incredible. I'm very, very tempted to move those rods back maybe a couple of meters off of that weed. Still fish those clutches tight. Don't give them a chance to bury into that weed. And I think that'll solve the problem. There's one other thing that happens when you do that. People think that if all a carp wants to do is run away from you. When you fish tight up to something with no line given at your end, very often they'll move left or right, and they'll kite at massive speed, but they'll go left or right. And yeah, sometimes when you pick the rod up, it surprises you how far they've moved. But it's one thing that you can do to ensure that they're not getting into an obstacle that you're fishing to. And you know, as much as I got that rig back with that bunch of weed, I'd lost a fish, and it's not the best thing in the world to do. So this is a quick brew. We're going to take a look at the fish now. I think I'm going to pop out a couple more spots, but I've got half an idea in this bad weather. I'm going to pop up to the little restaurant up there, the Waterside Cafe, and have myself a bacon butty. I'm always amazed when people pour scorn on a fish simply because of its size. This is a 15 pound 12-ounce mirror carp, and he is so unusual. You don't see scales, you won't be able to see from that distance. He is covered in tiny little microscopic scales all over him. Obviously an old warrior, probably a male fish, but just an incredible character. And yeah, whenever I'm catching carp like that, you're always going to see the biggest smile, no matter what the size. Okay, now for the best bit again, we'll get this little fella back, and then I think we need to get into exactly how I'm trying to combat this weed situation. I'm not pretending to be Jack Hargreaves, and we're certainly not trying to make a new version of Out of Town, but I'm definitely out of my swim. The weather, as I predicted, the weatherman predicted, has turned to very windy from the south-southeast and massive amounts of rain, which makes it incredibly difficult for us to film the more intricate and important aspects of the session I'm on at the moment. And probably the biggest thing in amongst all of that is the amount of weed that is still in this lake and is flourishing. And lakes, because of global warming for whatever reason, are tending to flourish or rearrange with weed now. So we all have to try and combat it. And what I wanted to go over is the reasons why I do things and the way that I try and get around the problems that will always be inherent when weed is there. First and foremost, I think the most obvious thing, and why chod rigs became so popular, I suggest, is to use a pop-up. Something that is going to overcome any of the diatrous flotsam and jetsam that's on the bottom of the lake. Just so you know, a bait is presented perfectly in amongst any of the free offerings that you're going to put out there. Okay, tying up the rig itself, the first thing I do is strip off 9, 10, 11 inches of 30-pound illusion. The next thing I'm going to do is tie with a free-turn blood knot. I know knots have become a very intricate part of it, but blood knots work. Just 3 turns, put it back through the first loop and gently and carefully butt it down to the large ring on the end of the chod rig. Butt it down gently, snip it off, and very carefully, when you're in the wind, try and shield it or whatever, just blob the end of the loose end. The next thing I'll do is wrap some tungsten putty around the top of the swivel, and the reason what I do is I put more putty on than I think I'll need. And the reason I do that is it's infinitely easier to nip the putty off with your fingers or with your teeth than it is to put it on once it's been in the water and it's wet. Those bits often fall off and ruin the buoyancy of your pop-up. The next thing, obviously, is to put the hook bait on. Now, a lot of people use bait floss, and I do occasionally, but I like to sort of recycle a lot of what I do. And my old bottom bait rigs are all tied up with 20-pound Camotex. And when I've finished with that rig, I cut the hook off, cut the swivel off, and that length, I strip all the coating off of it, and I put that in my pop-up bin pots. And I use that to blob the hook bait on. So put the braid through the loop of the little swivel on the chod rig, and then pull it through the hook bait, nip it off, and just burn it down and tap it down so you've got a nice stop with it. And now, I don't tie them up and store them with the swivel already attached to it. I only do that once the swivel's been set up in my helicopter setup. And once it's there, I put the big Flexi ring over my main line, so your hook link is going to be attached to the smaller end, if you like, of the swivel. And I put it through. I don't do anything that accurately, but 6 or 7 inches I'm aiming that boom to be, and I'm aiming to leave a loop that is about 1/2 inch big just to give that hook link some lateral movement along the bottom. And all I use, and there are other wonderful knots that people talk about, I know, is an overhand knot. I don't blob that off, I don't think there's any need to. I just trim it off close to the knot. And the last thing to do, because I want that hook bait to go as far away from the lead as I can possibly get it, is to use the tension tools. And one other brilliant little tactic that I discovered through being on the bank and talking to other people, you put the thick end through the loop you created with the hook link swivel, get the metal out the way, put the thin end through the large swivel at the end, and all you do is pull it very rapidly, 10, 15 times, it doesn't really matter. And what it does, it just heats up that material very, very marginally. And once you've got to 15, just hold it there for about 10 seconds. And when you take those the tension tools out, it will be straight as a die. And really, it don't get any better than that. Okay, I don't think my timing could be any better. We spent a couple of hours away, did a bit of shopping, had something to eat, did some bits and pieces. I'm back round in the swim where the wind has almost died away. It is raining a little bit, but it's not a fraction, as you can see from the ground around me, of what it was earlier on. The rods are all clipped up. I did them before we left this morning. The hook baits are dipped. Everything is ready to rock and roll. I didn't want to put any more bait out this morning. I guess there was a little bit left from last night. But as soon as I've put these rods in, I want to put a couple of spods over each spot just to freshen them up and see if we can get another couple of bites. The only way to get those is to get the rods in the pond. So I'm going to get rocking and rolling as quickly as I can. With the rods clipped up, it only took me 3 casts to have all the guns firing again, just after mid-afternoon. Quite often, winter bites can come just into darkness, so if there's ever a time to reposition the rods, this is the time I like to do it. I put 3 spombs of bait over each to see the spots through the night before retiring to the brolly for another warming brew. The evening was stunning considering the amount of rain we'd had, and due to the hectic night I'd had previously, I was asleep just as darkness fell. The weed at first with this one was no problem at all because it kited really hard to the left. But it's finding every other obstacle all the way in at the moment. And it's awful, isn't it? You love to put we all think we know what we've hooked because of the way it fights, but this does feel like a good fish, but again, they all do from here. They really, really know how to hang on. Goodness gracious. Oh, dearie me. Oh. Just always when you can see them like that in the light, it's heart in your mouth stuff, and I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. Unbelievable. No, I didn't think it would either. Yeah, he's got every idea what a landing net is, hasn't he? Well, that was an absolute massive battle, and yeah, fire's well and truly lit, I think. Oh, what a belter. Goodness. Look at that. It's unbelievable, and I can stand and look at them for hours. Interestingly, this 18-pound mirror was the third bite from my left-hand spot, and it can be very much the case that as much as I think they're grazing in the other areas, that's certainly an area that they really want to get their head down and they start competing. And again, the locked up clutch meant that fish had moved well over to the left, and it didn't hair off because it couldn't. Yeah, consequently I got it in the net quite quickly, but it found a few obstacles along the way and fought like a fish twice its size, to be quite honest with you, and that's half the fun of the fair. You don't know quite what you're getting in the net till it gets there, and at this time of year everything counts. Yeah, what a very handsome mirror. I couldn't be happier right now. The rest of the night passed without a bleep. Maybe the commotion over the past few nights had pushed them out, or maybe they'd had their feed for the week. All I knew is that after 4 fishing 2 nights, I was ready for a hot bath. I reeled the rods in and began to pack up, planning a return a few weeks later after Christmas. Unbeknown to me, the country was going to go into lockdown, and it would be quite a while before I would return. But return I certainly would. It's been such a long time since we've been here, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be back. It was our intention to come back a couple of weeks after our first session and just see how the winter fishing was progressing. But after all the restrictions that we were all put under, it was impossible to do. And as I say, it's been such a long time. And I've come back, the conditions are still cold, it's misty, we've got an easterly wind. It's very wintry conditions. I don't know enough about the lake to be totally sure of what to do. I've had a little look, I haven't seen a single thing. But this lake tends to find the carp concentrated in the middle area. So that is where I'm going to concentrate my efforts. It may look a little bit boring because I'm probably going to end up in the same swim I was in last time. But that offers me a brilliant view of the lake. I can see what's going on, but it also puts me on the winter spots. So without further ado, I'll push the bow around to that particular swim and we'll get fishing. And I don't want to cross my fingers, that's no plan at all, but I think in that swim, I've got a chance. With the kit in the swim, I eagerly got the rods ready. The last knot I did was in December, and with 4 fish I caught that still vivid in my mind, the confidence was high. With 2 nights at my disposal, my approach would be the same swim as before, and if nothing happened, move onto any signs of fish. The rigs and bait wouldn't change, but due to the cold winter, I would err on the side of caution with the bait, starting with a few spoms on each rod and topping the spots up should I receive a bite. With the early mist and cloud beginning to lift, the temperatures very slightly lifted with it, and as usual, the kettle began to earn its keep. to the outside viewer, it might look absolutely perfect, but I have one massive problem. Directly opposite me, some 170, 180 yards across the other side of the lake, is an out of bounds bank. I am not allowed to fish over there. I can walk up and down it, as I did earlier on, just as the sun was starting to shine. And, well, it doesn't take much to guess that that is where all the carp are. There's squadrons over there going up and down in front of the reeds that are just starting to breathe a little bit more life into themselves. But the one thing for me is those carp are moving. And in the winter, your fishing can be an awful lot different. The reasons we do things and the reason why things happen can be an awful lot different to your summer fishing. You can sort of take the battle to the carp in the summer. You can go stalking them, surface fishing, moving around, and generally finding your fish quite easily. It's a different ball game in the winter. I know where they are right now, right over the other side of the lake, and I can't go fishing for them over there. So I've set myself some traps. It probably, a great large part of my winter fishing is setting some traps in an area I hope they're going to come across. Hope's no plan at all, really, but I think the way that I've put the rods out, there's a nice spread of bait along a whole area out there behind a big bank of weed and just in front of another. I think it's a perfect ambush point, and I think with the amount of energy those carp are showing over there, they've got to come out to feed a little bit later on, and I'll be waiting for them. As the afternoon passed, the winter sun quickly descended beyond the tree line. The air soon had that late winter chill, and I knew the carp would be venturing away from their sunbeds in search of an evening meal. But I didn't expect to get a bite this early.
Oh, you're in.
Unbelievably, a little sooner than I thought, I've got a carp on. Excuse me for being quiet. I think there's a little bit of weed involved here, and I don't want to need to concentrate on keeping it moving yet. When we're moving, very often when you get that weed slides down and over their eyes, it's just a simple case of diving them into the net, and some might like that, but I do like to have a battle with a carp. They know the lake better than we do. He knows he's got to the margins here, and that looks okay. Yes! Well, what a fantastic way to start things off, and yeah, before I light my fire. That is a lovely fish too, looks clean as a whistle. Look at that. Wow. Fortunately for me, all three rods are 13 3/4 lengths out there, and I've put my spare rod at that. I've got a hook bait on it, all balanced up, dipped, ready to rock and roll. So while that carp just gets itself settled in the bottom of that net, I'm going to get this rod out, get it settled. I'm back in the ball game, and if there's anything else out there who wants to have a nibble, I'm ready for him. Absolutely couldn't have done that better. Ooh. My goodness, that is my gracious, either that or I am inordinately old. That's a lot bigger than I thought it was, boy. Look at that. Well, I'm just getting old. 24. 10.
Yep, 24.10.
Yeah, that will do very nicely for me. Poof. What a way to start off in the Cotswolds on my return. A real classic pot of gold coins. What a beautiful common scale, perfect shape, and in absolutely unbelievable condition. She really is a stunner, and yeah, I think the weed helped to slow her down in the water, so she's not forgiven me too much for that on the bank, to be honest with you, but it's just an amazing thing. You know, cold water carping, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but as I've always said, the carp you catch will always look their best. And now, as I'll always say, the best bit, and see them go off, and yeah, it's moments like this, if you don't catch another one, you'll never be sorry. Unbelievable. Go and say hello to your friends. And as sad as it seems, I hope I never see you again. Bless her heart. Go on. Oh. Damn. Probably still see her. As if the session couldn't have got off to a better start, just a few hours later, I received another bite. All a bit of a muddle again, but yeah, just sat down for a brew. A monster liner on this rod just before it. We didn't rip off, I think. He found that bank of weed. I said I'm fishing as tight as I can to it, which obviously means the fish can get in there quite quick. It's why I have the clutch very tight. And there he is out there. Got to keep the rod down low now. Bless his heart. It's a daisy. This is going out between my legs. Beautiful little mirror. Yes! Wow. I'm still in flames from the last one, but yeah, I think that might have just sparked up another fire. Just unbelievable. I didn't expect to get to, certainly on the first night, let alone the first evening, so I'll get myself sorted. Look at that. Unique set of scales. I've certainly not seen this fish from this lake before. Wow, look at the depth of that. It felt so heavy, Brad must have got out of the water. Oh, yes, man. They get a touch bigger.
26.7.
Yeah. Unbelievable. You got that? Good man. Wow. Well, on my second celebratory brew after catching that common, and one of the other rods was away. 26 pound and 7 ounce of just stunning mirror carp, absolutely perfect in every way, and yeah, she's probably one of the angriest carp I've caught in a long while too. She really hasn't given up and didn't really want her photograph taken, but she deserves it. And especially on a cold, wintry night such as this, to catch such a spellbinding animal is all I could ever ask for. And yeah, 26 pounds and 7 ounces, and yeah, they're getting a touch bigger along the way. Thank you so much. I never get tired of saying this either. Light my fire, and for as long as it's blazing, I'll be trying to catch carp like that. It's just incredible. You know, it's I'm going through the most difficult times a human being could ever go through, and to know I've still got this in my life. And if I sound a little emotional about it, it's because I am. I've got Lynn in my life, and to get me out from out under her feet every now and again, I can go carp fishing, and really can't ask for any more than that. Oh dear. After a hectic early evening spell, I received no more bites throughout the night. The morning was a drab and heavy with fog affair, far from optimal fish spotting conditions. So, quite sensibly, I decided to grab a few more hours of much needed sleep before reeling in the rods and heading over to the on-site cafe for a breakfast. Upon returning to my swim, I went about preparing the traps for the final night of the session. As always, having the rods in position well before the usual bite time. We've gone over the rig that I'm using, but I think it's just as important to look at the lead system that I used while I'm using that rig. It's a bit primeval, to be honest with you. For many years ago, I could tangle an iron bar when I cast it out for some unknown reason, and there's nothing worse than sitting there worrying about tangles. With my £30 Illusion boom on my stiff link pop-up, set up on a helicopter system, I have no need to worry about leads. As soon as I've felt that lead down, I know that everything is presented perfectly and just as I want it to. Now, I am fishing a lake that in parts is very, very weedy. Indeed, the spot I'm fishing now is up right tight as I can possibly get to a big bank of weed. And some would wonder why I'm using a helicopter setup. And again, it's all those years ago I learned a lesson. I'm not the greatest fan of leaving hundreds of leads in a lake, of leaving a lead there every bite I get. And using a helicopter rig in the weed, I have always found, myself personally, that it takes the pressure off the hook hold. When a lead's ejected and the carp is stuck there in the weed, you're pulling directly on that hook, and the weed can get in between the hook and it falls out. It's a perfect natural hook disgorger. And I've found that more of my fish stay on doing it this way. Many would not see it that way, and I quite understand, but from my personal experiences, that has been the way that it's had to go. And it's worth showing you how the rig is made up itself. And what I'll do is I'll just pull these parts, the bits apart, so that you can see everything and how it is constructed. I'll start at the top and work my way down to the bottom. I have two mainline sinkers on there, run up the line. They run quite freely, but if you put a 2 on there, it just makes it have a little bit more grip. Small camo bead, buffed up against the first sinker. Obviously it's there to stop the hook link running up the line, and it doesn't add any tension to the grip of the sinkers either. It still runs quite freely. off of the line. Flexi ring swivel is what holds my hook link to the main line, and it's done with the largest part of the swivel over the main line, and that gives, again, it's a safety aspect. The smaller one could easily get trapped on the line. The bigger one gives it freer movement, and again allows the carp to get rid of it should there be any accidents. Next, we've got a Chod Heli buffer sleeve. Absolutely ideal if you want to use naked chods or stiff link pop-ups as I do, because that top part of the sleeve protects the line once you've hooked the fish. It's absolutely ideal. And there you go, as you're playing that fish, that is pulling against that and doing no damage to your main line whatsoever. It's very, very safe indeed. Now, we run down, on this instance, a 3.5 ounce distance lead. And you'll notice on the lead, I've put a little bit of silicone sleeving on there. And what that does is give the buffer something to grip to so that it never comes out of position, either when you're casting it or when you're playing the fish. It just gives it a little bit more chance of keeping that swivel connected to the buffer. I've tied it on with a very simple 7-turn blood knot. Leave a bit of a long tail on it, which again adds to the buffer getting more grip. Slide it all down and put that bead at whatever distance you think it needs to be at. On clear ground, you can have it quite tight to the lead, and if you're fishing in silt or anything over the top of weed, you can push it further and further up your main line to make sure you get perfect presentation. Your leg can be buried in the silt, and your hook link is basically fished over the top of it. It's a setup that gets me around so many problems, and I fish it mainly when I'm fishing over a spread of boilies, and as I've always said, a carp is so much more catchable when he's moving between mouthfuls. Just to update you on the session itself, we're just coming up to the evening of day 2, and basically all I've been doing is looking at the water really, and it looks a little bit like the weather and activity on the animal front, the wildlife front, has been cancelled for the day. It's just unbelievable. I've seen nothing. But the session started well. I had 2 fish last night, a 24 common and a 26 pound mirror. I couldn't have been happy. They're very, very special fish, and anything from here is a really good prize. But looking around now, you can see absolutely nothing. There was nothing I saw that would make me move at all. There was, obviously no fish showing today, so it makes sense to stay in the spot I'm in. I've repositioned the rods in exactly the same way as I did the night before. Put 3 or 4 spods over the rod, the 2 rods that did produce, and I've just put a couple on the other one just to freshen up the spots. I don't want to put lots there, and again I've put probably a few more pellets in just to keep them there that little bit longer, but it's perfect. I couldn't have done it any better, and I feel confident that the bites will come again in the early evening, or the bite. I just think there will be some activity. When I fished here last winter, it was the same time. Early evening was when you seem to get the bites, and whilst they're over there probably having a day off on that far bank that's out of bounds, it gives me that chance to get everything absolutely perfect as I want it to, and now it is. I hand everything over to the carp and just hope they're a little hungry, which I think they are, and I think I'm in exactly the right place. This is the final morning of my 40-hour session here, and what a session it's been. Last night I had 2 fish again, and the first one around sort of 10 in the evening was a small common, probably about 12 pound, and I got it in the net so fast we got no chance of filming it. I just unhooked it in the net and let him on his way, just so I didn't have to mess him around too much. Repositioned the rod and climbed back into my bed. It was so cold last night, it was unbelievable. And I must admit, before I dropped off to sleep, I was looking at the bobbins, wondering if I would get another bite. But an hour later I did, on the same rod. It ripped off, and the fish was slightly bigger, probably 15, 16 pound. And it was a mirror, and it was a mirror, I think, that sort of underlines everything I say about carp fishing. It's what they look like a lot of the time, not necessarily the size. And it was utterly covered in starburst scales all over it, scales that you could hardly see. And in all intents and purposes, it was a fully scaled, and it would have been remiss of me not to get a good look at it on the bank. And yeah, certainly made me smile and made me incredibly happy about a wonderful winter session here. My time here is over. I need to move on to other lakes that, for reasons I won't go into now, are very close to home, but I'm looking forward to it. It's a very historic place and a very historic lake, so I can only hope you've enjoyed the Edges series, and I can tell you it's been an absolute joy making it. If you want to see more, press the subscribe button below, and all I can do is wish you all the best in your fishing, and I hope that all your fires get lit.